next week and I may have an idea. So a week later I came down to see him and he introduced me to this man who had just lost a job. He was 39 years old. It seemed so old for me at the time. And introduced me to this man, and we started to talk. And I said, well, you know, I really don't have very much money to pay you. What do you need? He said, well, I tell you why. If you give me $300 a week and 25% of the company, I will come. Well, 25% of the company is zero, so 25% of zero is zero. So I figured what am I going to lose? So I said, okay. And of course, he didn't really understand the clothes very well. So what I did is I made a men's shirt for him, made out of the fabric. So he put the shirts on, and then he understood the value of the jersey fabric. He understood that it felt soft and it felt good. And he was a very, very good salesman. So we took a showroom at 530 7th Avenue, and we took a showroom, and he had a long, long list of specialty stores, and he got on the phone and made everybody come, and everybody started to buy these nothing little dresses. And he would ship me everywhere. I would go to Oklahoma, and I would go to Palm Springs and Philadelphia, and I would arrive there, and people would say, who's this crazy little girl? And I would show the clothes, and the clothes were very stylish, very nice, kind of sexy without being, too, just nice. And it showed the body, and they would sell. They would just sell. And especially there was a little wrap top that came with a skirt, and which actually Julie Eisenhower, I remember, wore. She made a speech when she was wearing that, and so I was so, and I thought, well, maybe I should turn that top into a dress, and that became the wrap dress. And that wrap dress became immediately just something incredible, and everybody wore it. And that landed me on the cover of the Wall Street Journal in 1976. And the reason, since this is a heavy women's room, I'm going to tell you a very funny story. I had small children at home. I was separated by then, but I had small children at home. So I would try to stay at home as much as possible to have dinner with them, which means that very often, as he would ship me to go to places, I would take very, very early flights in the morning. And that morning that the Wall Street Journal came out, I was on my way to Pittsburgh, very early flight, 7 o'clock flight. I was the only woman on the plane, and I have a whole bunch of magazines, and on top of it, I have the Wall Street Journal. And I'm sitting, and there's a guy next to me, and he's looking at my legs, and he's looking, and he really wants to talk, and he goes like that, he's kind of trying to find this line, and then he looks at me and he says, why does a pretty girl like you read the Wall Street Journal?
Well, I'm on the cover.
And I looked at him, and I thought, jerk. But I have to tell you, I never told him. I never said, here, idiot, that's me right there. I didn't. And of all the satisfactions I've had in my life, one of the biggest satisfactions I've had is that I've never told him that. Of course, every time I speak, I tell the story. So anyway, all of a sudden, every store wanted to have my clothes. Overnight, I became a huge, huge success, and companies, all kinds of companies, approached me. We would like to do scarves with your name, or eyewear, or jewelry, or bags. And I mean, at the time, I didn't even know licensed business and everything. It was like I became a brand overnight. And that same year, I was also on the cover of Newsweek. Well, Newsweek at the time was a lot more powerful. Time in Newsweek was a lot more powerful than now that we have CNN and the internet. And to be on the cover of Newsweek was in 5 continents. Can you believe it? 28 years old. The writer who wrote the story would not believe my age, and they checked my birth certificate in Belgium. And so it was, we were making at that time 25,000 dresses a week. But my salesman, all he wanted to do was the same dress, wrap dress, green and white, blue and white, red and white. My Italian manufacturer didn't want me to diversify, the same wrap dress. But I would go to the stores and I would know that maybe there are too many wrap dresses around, and maybe I am saturated in the market. I mean, every woman in America had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, how many can you have? So what had to happen, happened. And I have a nice picture. All of a sudden, I found myself with a whole big bunch of inventory. And for the first time, since I had started, everything had gone to gold. Everything was wonderful, keep on growing. And all of a sudden, I am stuck with $4 million or $3 million worth of inventory. And all the stores are full of merchandise, so it was really hard. It was really, really hard. I was young, I wasn't 30 yet, but those same companies that I had approached 5 years before, it was only 5 years because this was 1978, so it was only really 4 or 5 years. And those same persons that I had gone to see to make a deal with, who didn't want me because that wasn't volume, they would say. Now all of a sudden they were interested because they knew that it was a big name and blah, blah, blah. So what I did is I found one of those big 7th Avenue company. I made a deal with them. They took my inventory. We made a licensing deal, which means that I would only be involved in the design and they would take care of the manufacturing, the distribution, and all of that. Anyway, but I had gone by going on personal appearance all around the country, I had really become it was so fun for me to meet all these women all around the country because I had become the woman I wanted to become. I mean, I was this independent woman, successful, and I would travel, and I did that through fashion. And through fashion, I would sell my dresses to other women, and the confidence that I had gained, I was sharing with the clothes, and therefore I was selling it in the form of the wrap dress. So it was just this extraordinarily wonderful dialogue that established itself between me and the consumers. And at the time we used to wear a lot of makeups, and I used to think that all of the makeups was very kind of old-fashioned. So I said, oh, okay, now I'll become Estee Lauder. And I was a little arrogant. And so the first thing I did the research and worked with chemists and so on. And while I was doing the research, it all came out in a book called The Book of Beauty, which, of course, at 28 years old, now I realized, how can I not be beautiful, right? But anyway, and I came out with a beautiful fragrance called Tatiana. Tatiana was the name of my daughter. And once again, a line of cosmetics, and once again, I went on the road, and this time selling cosmetics. And again, I must say that within 5 years, I became very, very successful. Our products were everywhere. Every cosmetic companies were copying my colors. Tatiana was one of the top fragrance in America. My name was high up there in the name of businesswomen. But one day I was in Paris and I get a phone call from my new president, because the first one had disappeared. I mean, we parted ways when I parted ways with the dresses, and this time I had another president, and he was a man dressed in a gray suit, and he looked very proper, and he was what I thought was a businessman, and he was a businessman. And he called me, I was in Paris, and he said, well, I think you're going to have to come because the banks don't want to give us any more money. I said, what? And he said, no, the banks want your personal guarantee. So I hadn't realized, and I should have, but I had realized that in order to grow the cosmetic company, we had borrowed money. We had borrowed millions of dollars from Chemical Bank. And all of a sudden, they wanted to stop, and they wanted some kind of a personal guarantee. So I went back, and I met with the bankers, and there was no way I was going to give them my personal guarantee because I had bought a beautiful house in the country for my children and an apartment in New York, and I was too afraid to lose that. So I said to them, well, what do you want me to do? You want me to sell the company? And the guy said, well, if you can. I still remember his face. And I said, of course I can, because people had indeed approached me to sell the company. So I did sell the company to a pharmaceutical English company called Beecham, who at the time had decided that they were going into cosmetics and they were buying all kinds of cosmetics companies. So I sold the company. And at the same time, my children are now teenagers. So when your children are teenagers, you love them, but you don't like them, and they don't like you either. So my children went to boarding school, and I moved to Paris. I mean, I really had sold my company, so I moved to Paris, and I still had a small office, and because we had licensees, and we kind of had to pay to the licensees, even though they didn't listen to me, and so I stayed in Paris for about 4.5 years. And then my children grew. While I was in Paris, in order to kind of be a little bit connected with licenses and everything, first I had a publishing house, because my love for books, remember? I started a publishing house in France, where I translated books, and I also made these kind of books, decorating books, which, kept my name alive back here in America. And my children grew. It was time for them to go to college. They both went to Brown, and they started to have ideas about what they were going to do with their lives. And so my love affair in Paris kind of finished, and I decided to come back to New York. So here I'm coming back. And I am back in New York, and this was the hardest time in my life. I came back, and when I left for Paris, I was still very successful. The name still represented a certain spirit, a certain spirit of a modern woman, and it meant something. By the time I came back 5 years later, the name, the products, everything was so bad. The designs were awful, the distribution was low, it had lost complete sense. The pharmaceutical company that had bought my cosmetic company decided they didn't want to go in cosmetics, so they threw out the thing. I mean, it was just awful. And I tried to, I still had some licensees, and I went around to them and tried to tell them, that maybe I can help them, but I knew they would look at me and just look at me like I was a has-been and just say, when is she going to get out of this room, And I felt terribly insecure. I felt terribly bad. I felt actually quite awful, to the point that, well, I'll get there later. But I thought that, I said, my consumers, the woman I used to have a dialogue with, if the stores don't remember, if these new buyers don't remember, all they remember is the clothes and the product that have been in this, selling for the last 5 years. But the consumer remembers. So how can I go and talk to the consumers directly? So I thought of a catalog, and I thought of all kinds of Until one day, Marvin Traub, who was president, who had been chairman of Bloomingdale's and who knew me well, one day he said to me, "I'm going to take you some very interesting place." And we went that day to Pennsylvania to look and visit a company called QVC. And QVC was selling on television. And we walked into the studio, and it was a room not quite as glamorous as this, but I mean, there was an audience, and it was like that, it was a stage. And there was Susan Lucci, you know, from the soap opera. She was selling shampoo. And within, I don't know, within very short time, she had sold hundreds of thousands of dollars of shampoo. I thought, oh my God, this is like a personal appearance on a national basis. This would be really interesting. Mind you, it was very tacky, but I thought, you know what, I will make that. And so they were very interested. The woman there was very interested, but she didn't really want the cosmetics, she wanted the clothes. But I said, how can you sell clothes on television? I mean, that's really difficult. She said, no, we want clothes. So I said, well, let me think about it. And then I had the idea. I said, what is it that you can buy that is clothes that you could possibly buy on television? And I came up with the idea, because after all, prints and colors are always my thing, even though today I'm wearing a black sweater. I thought that I would do a line of scarves and shirts printed, and matching pants, and you know, easy pants and easy skirts. So there would be pieces which I had called silk assets, and they would be, you know, everything would be coordinated, so you could mix and match the solid and the print, and it would be easy. And because you know, you have to do it in big size if you go on QVC, and you have no idea how big the size. But I do not want to be politically incorrect. So I went to Hong Kong, and I went to a factory that I had met years ago, and because it's silk. And when I left them, they were a tiny factory, and I was a big designer. Now I'm coming back, and they are a big factory, and I'm a no-one designer. But they remembered me, and I said, this is the idea, blah, blah, and this and that, and we made a sample, they placed the order, and we are 92, I forget the date. But anyway, I went on QVC, and in an hour and a half, no, in 2 hours, we sold $1.5 million. So all of a sudden, I was no longer a has-been, and I had become a pioneer again. And what that really did is that it gave me confidence, because you will find out that confidence is so much a part of success. You have to believe in what you do. But very often you go to moments that you stop believing in what you do, and that's not very good. So I knew so I got my confidence again, and but I also knew that selling on television was not necessarily what I wanted to, you know, I still wanted to go back to those clothes that I knew how to make. And at the time, all the big department stores were merging. And so I went to have breakfast with the chairman of one of them, and I said, listen, I have an idea. I will become your in-house designer. I will have a design studio. I will design. I will find the places where to produce it, but you will order them. You will place the order, so I never own inventory again. And I can do that for home, and I can do that fashion and for beauty. And they said, okay, that sounds like a good idea.